Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Game Logic from the Rounding Off Infinity Gaming channel on YouTube, the E2KG Network podcasting channel on YouTube. Here with my co-host DBQ Hams back. It's been quite a bit since I've been in the host's chair. We're back with another episode of the Enough to Keep Going weekly games podcast, Gamers for Life, episode number 242. There's not a lot of news this week, actually. So we're going to talk about games, which maybe that too there isn't that much.
I'm pretty sure we can fill time if we need to.
We always do. I've got some interesting nits to talk about why there isn't a lot of games, and I'm sure you will regale me with yours as well. So we're going to talk a little bit of games up front, and then move on to the news that there is for this week. It's actually kind of some meaty news for us to discuss, and then swing back to wrap up the last bits and pieces of our gamer experience. So without much further ado, let's go ahead and get to it. DBQ, I'm going to let you kick things off so you can tell us about your most recent experiences in Gunfire Reborn Mobile. And I'm curious, I'd also like to hear why mobile this week. I think there's a story behind that, but I'm not sure.
Sure, there's always a story behind it, right? I think Gunfire Reborn was in early access for a few years. It's a Hong Kong studio, Chinese studio, Doi Games. And it launched kind of 1.0 release last fall. Talked about it on the show at that point in time. Swiss also has played some of it and enjoyed it. It's a first-person roguelike. You're moving from room to room. You have artifacts to equip, like Slay the Spire and other roguelikes. You're gaining guns that have extra damage or status effects, like many other looter shooters types of things. And it's all kind of in a relatively cell-shaded, cartoony type of way. But it's pretty satisfying. It's a quick run. A run through is maybe 6 levels in a dungeon. And, it also has some persistent progression that as you go, you collect souls, which then allow you to level up your character, increasing life, increasing your abilities, increasing your gun damage, increasing shields. And so over time, you start to build up a stronger character to make a deeper run. And there is some procedurally generated randomness to it, as many roguelikes have. And so I enjoyed it on Steam. I've played it on and off, kind of come back to it, but really haven't had a chance to dive into it on Steam. And in part, it's just the way my gaming this first half of the year has gone, that I haven't been sitting at a computer nearly as much as I had in the fall. So when I saw that Gunfire Reborn was coming out on mobile, I was pretty interested to give it a try. This week on mobile, we also get a big free-to-play release with Apex Legends Mobile, and they both released on the same day, but I chose to pick up the $6.99 Gunfire Reborn. So this is not a free-to-play game. This is a $7 game, which I will say that I'm glad to pay a little bit, not to weed through a whole lot of ads and progression systems that gate me with multiple currencies that I need to purchase or buy a battle pass for. So I'm fine paying $7, right? I skipped a lunch at work, and there we go. I got my mobile game. It does require an internet connection because you do have the ability to group up, play up to 4 players, just like the full game. That you can. I think there's actually crossplay. I haven't dug in too much because it just came out yesterday in terms of it, but it plays out like you would expect a first-person shooter on a touchscreen. It has a variety of controller supports already built into it, but on touchscreen it works pretty well. You've got your axes, your movement, your 2 sticks, virtual sticks, which aren't too bad because you have the option of turning firing to auto, so that as you're coming within a hitbox of a character, it will auto fire. And rather than you can do a manual fire, but having auto fire actually makes it a little easier to kind of make your way through. It makes it a little more casual in terms of its experience, but it also helps navigate as you're switching between your abilities or your ability you unlock as you go, or your grenades or other items that you have, or swapping between weapons. So in terms of mobile play, I'm playing it on a 2018 iPad, and it runs really smooth because of its kind of cel-shaded graphics. You start with only one character, and as you progress, you do have the ability to unlock multiple different characters with different types of abilities or special abilities as you go through. So there is some unlock, some progression aspects there for some rewards, but it's still really satisfying. I mean, you can sit down and do a run within 15, 20 minutes, and it is just as satisfying as it is playing on PC. That I think it works really well. I haven't had the chance yet to play online with people, so I don't know if on mobile you end up with some lag issues or frame rate pieces. It does have 3 different graphical settings. So you kind of have the low end graphical settings, which kind of keeps a balanced frame rate around 30 frames per second. And then you can have something smoother, and then you can have an HD, depending on the quality of your mobile hardware, that you can scale it. And given the kind of cel shaded, cartoony, oil painting like graphics, I would say that having it in HD is all fine and good, but having it run at a consistent frame rate and feel pretty smooth as you're moving around and needing some level of accuracy as you're playing in a first person shooter, it runs pretty smooth on a 4-year-old iPad. So I was pretty pleased with that as well. Again, if you've played it before, if you've talked to people who have played it, you kind of know what you're getting into, where it really is, it's a first person Slay the Spire, right? It's a combination of a Slay the Spire roguelike and Borderlands. And if you want a Borderlands roguelike, this works out really well. As somebody who just last week was talking about closing off Borderlands 3, diving into Tiny Tina, I enjoy the art style. I enjoy the multiple different variety of guns, but I've also talked here about enjoying a number of different roguelikes over the past year as well, but roguelikes that do offer some type of consistent progression. And so this coming to mobile is a nice pairing with what's already out there in terms of a variety of roguelikes. Steam just had a roguelike Rogue Light sale a few weeks ago. Rogue Legacy 2 just came out a couple weeks ago as well. So there's no shortage of rogue games, but it's nice to have a high quality one sitting on a mobile device for when you're not able to get to a gaming console or PC.
So one thing I want to mention is shout out to Erodimus swinging through the chat. So we appreciate you stopping by, and good to see you. One of my mutuals from Twitter. So good to see people swinging by and hanging out. So DBQ, is this remind me, is this a game? It says Gunfire Reborn mobile, but is this a game that's on PC and that you played on PC as well?
Yes, there's Gunfire Reborn is out on PC. It's out on Steam. It's $20. I think it's been on sale for $15 at a variety of different times. Yeah, so I've played it on PC. Only have a couple hours into it. I know Swiss has more hours into it. Swiss, I was playing with Swiss or talking to Swiss about it at one point in time last fall, and he's got a family member who's got over 100 some hours into it. So it's one of those where you can easily kind of lose yourself in the run-based aspects of it as you're unlocking things.
Right, so you're playing this roguelike this week. I was playing Everspace last week and made my choice to bounce off of it. Now, part of that choice was driven because I went to Everspace. We all know that I'm not a roguelike fan. I went to Everspace because I was looking for a space flight sim, and I was fine with it being wrapped in that roguelike dressing. Is this... You are a... I'll call you, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, you're a tepid roguelike player. Sometimes it hits you, sometimes it doesn't, but you're also not like super wrapped around the axle about like being obsessed with sticking with a thing if it's just not hitting. With regards to how this is as a shooter, just to kind of make an analogy, one of my analogies that I often use with 2-in-1 laptops is, don't worry, this will fit. With 2-in-1 laptops is, this is a great tablet, it's a really horrible laptop. And so is this a case of being a decent roguelike, and is it also a good shooter, or is it one more so than the other?
I would say both the mobile version, I mean, the PC version is a better roguelike than it is a shooter, right? Like, you are not going to Borderlands as a franchise because the first person shooter aspect is the premier in the genre, right? You are going because that's a mechanic that you enjoy, but you also enjoy the Diablo-esque loot aspect to it. I would say that this is similar in that, especially even more so the mobile version, because I was saying that you do have the option of having a auto gunfire, so it really does kind of change that a little bit more. So it is more of a action RPG, first person action RPG aspect to it, more than it is there's a reason I chose this over Apex Legend Mobile in terms of I'm not looking for necessarily a precision first-person shooter aspect on my mobile, but looking for some type of a mobile game with some good RPG elements and some progression systems that give me a ability to kind of jump in and out on a regular basis without feeling like I need to invest in, X amount of currency to maintain progress. And so something that isn't gated by the economics of the mobile market.
All right. Now, does this game play with controller also? And were you playing it with a controller, or you were playing touchscreen?
I was playing touchscreen really because I wanted to see how the touchscreen played out. It does have controller support. It doesn't have Razer Kishi yet. I think was one of the few that, as I was looking online about it, but it is a developer that has been adding things to their Steam game. So I would assume that this is something that will end up keep getting support as well, but it does support a variety of controllers, Bluetooth controllers there. So I probably will check it out that way just to see how it plays. But it's also one of those where if I really wanted to play a shooter, I'd sit in front of my console or I'd grab my Switch, where if I'm sitting in bed or on a couch while something else is on TV, this is easy enough to kind of putz around with and chip away at and feel like I'm, making some enjoyment and progression while something else is going on.
So I, of course, when I do play on mobile, I'm still a gamer on mobile, and so I still insist on playing with a controller. I mean, other than the science experiment of like trying to play with the touch controls, do you envision going at the core gameplay with controller, or do you think you'll? And let me go back. It's for that reason. We've talked on the show before how when I go on travel, part of my go bag is, well, up until now, there's some reasons why that will have changed, but I chuck, a tablet, which I'm always going to take a tablet with me, and a controller in the bag. Do you think that's going to be your route also, or do you anticipate just sticking with touch controls?
I think what will really define it is as I get further into the game, if enemies have enough precision aspects to them where the touch controls aren't going to do it for me. Like as you take on some of the larger bosses, as you get through a dungeon, like if they end up having, if the touch control aiming isn't precise enough to be able to hit the spots where I need to hit or get critical hits on things like that, then I could see a reason why I would jump on with a controller. But at the same time, I think the way that I end up playing mobile is it's either while I'm traveling or it's sitting in bed or at a table somewhere. If it is serviceable, I will probably end up keeping it. But at the same time, it wouldn't be too hard to grab a controller and prop it up and, I would think that if I was going to spend longer periods with it, I will play on controller. But if I am looking at my, division of gaming time and I've got a window of 15 to 30 minutes here as I'm waiting for family members to do something else, I could see myself just popping on using touch controls just to pass the time.
Now, and then did you grab this through Apple Arcade, and are you still subscribed to Apple Arcade?
No, it is a purchase. Yeah, it's not on Apple Arcade. It's a $6.99 game. So I paid up front.
All right. But are you still on Apple Arcade regardless?
No, I dipped in last fall for a couple games. Probably will, we'll see what comes out. I've been kind of keeping an eye on what comes out on Apple Arcade to see if it's worth kind of jumping back into here and there. But no, I'm not.
Okay.
Are you still on it?
Nope.
I know you were on it for one time.
I have, as promised from our podcast a couple of weeks ago, I have stripped all subscriptions. So I dropped Apple Arcade, dropped Google Stadia, and then I held on to PC Game Pass for a couple more weeks, but I dropped that one as well.
Oh, I didn't realize that you had dropped PC Game Pass.
I did. Yep. It is, as we've talked about, there's just the way that I was using a service and with what the Microsoft slate looks like right now, there's just not enough going in there for me.
I think that's a really good discussion, tying into our discussion from last week around Bethesda's delays, like looking at that outside of indie games and sampling things, which is not the type of gamer you are. I can completely see why where the value doesn't add up and it's time to step away.
Well, I would actually say, so I have been that type of gamer before, but we're definitely hitting a pivot now where, so if we go back before the Star Citizen times, right, where a lot of my gaming was oriented, and it still has been and is in a certain way, where a lot of my gaming was oriented around the podcast and blogging and whatever website I was writing for, right? The Game Pass made sense in that it gave me access to a lot of games where even when I'm buying 2 games a month, there still might be something else that I need to go take a look at, right, for writing, podcasting, or otherwise conversational purposes. But now we're going into a pivot. Let me stick on the former theme first, though. People, just like you mentioned, right, when I said, I don't really see a reason to recommend an Xbox to somebody a couple weeks ago, you pushed back and said, oh no, I still think Xbox is a good value. And I agree with you. There's still a big demographic of gamer for which Game Pass makes sense, right? Mom and pop are going to buy little Johnny a console. Maybe they just go to get him the $299 Series S because they can't afford much more, or it doesn't make much sense for him to have much more. And there's a super convenience in just getting him Game Pass, right? For the type of gamer who doesn't do what we do and pays laser precise attention to the news cycle and knows what's coming out and knows when something gets delayed and yada, 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 it makes sense for a person to have Game Pass. For a person who is hyper-focused on the upper crust of what comes out on the market and the AAA titles and the top 20% of those AAA titles, I don't, with the recent perturbations, that's where I just don't know that Game Pass makes the most sense for $120, $180, a year. For me, on top of that, one of the things that I've done most recently in continuing this struggle of like, what do I want to play? What am I obligated to play? I have, and as I've gone through this journey of like finally letting myself indulge in, you know, live service games and games as a service, and then went through the times where I was, you know, I did that, but it was in a dedicated manner to Star Citizen or Destiny 2, or I was looking for like that one MMO, and then the year that I was addicted to Call of Duty, Black Ops Cold War. Now, as I'm coming out of that, I'm like, okay, what's the next phase? And kind of what I've come around and decided to. And I mentioned this maybe a couple weeks ago, but I've locked down on it a little more. So I'm in a phase now where I am going to give myself over to playing some of these subscription-based games, live living games as a service, because as we've talked before, there is a certain element of them that I find significantly appealing, and that's the persistent progression model, and the notion that I'm not going to play these games for 40 hours, mature a character to the maximum level cap, and then walk away from them and be done. It's huge to me that, you know, as we've talked about before with Destiny, that, you know, in some cases, right, there's literally, well, I mean, not now because I've dropped my PlayStation, but, you know, but there was a PlayStation character in Destiny 2 that I had literally been playing pretty much that exact same character, because it was the one character that I brought over cosmetically from Destiny to Destiny 2. I'd been playing that character since 2014, right? So there's a wonderful feeling of investment. And so I've worked out some kind of paradigms, right, in terms of I've figured out kind of mathematically that, okay, I can have, and I think Tao goes through this also, you know, he and I have both been through this struggle of, okay, how many battle passes is enough, right? There needs to be a finite amount. And I definitely went through my times where I was just like, okay, whatever random game I'm going to play this week, if it's got a battle pass, I'm just going to go ahead and onboard into the battle pass. And as of most recently, what I've said is I figured out that the maximum number is 3, right? I can be on 3 battle passes, and that can take up roughly 50% of my gaming time. And then the other half can be something else. So one of those games has been Warframe. And while I have toe-dipped into Warframe, and I had multiple accounts on Xbox, PlayStation, Nintendo Switch, PC, now that I just have the one account on PC, I'm finally able to kind of give that game kind of the attention and concentration that you have to if you're a new player, because there's a ton of stuff. There's like 30-something quests in that game, right? Plus weekly adventures, plus all kinds of crazy stuff, most of which you can access for free. And so I have to use a guide to kind of peel back the onion layers and figure out like, okay, which quest am I supposed to do now? Then you have to figure out the exact mechanics sometimes to access a quest. So I've completed kind of the...
Did you end up starting over, or did you continue your character that you've kind of chipped away at over the years?
I continued my character on PC, but that character hadn't advanced. But so far, they were not as far as some of my accounts that I had on the consoles. So that character was still at their very early vestiges of kind of just getting into the greater panacea of Warframe campaign. So that character is now just on like the second series of quests. Through the first couple times that I did it, I still didn't really understand, right, the exact sequence. Now I finally get it. Like to get to other planets, there are sometimes a series of events that you have to do as kind of singular standalone events. They are not really technically part of the quest proper, but they are the thing that you have to go through to get to the gate, to unlock the gate, to get to the follow-on quest. Now that I understand that structure, because I didn't understand it before, and I was always thoroughly frustrated, I kept going back to like the gate, and I was like, well, why the heck do I have to do that? Like, it doesn't tell you to do that in the quest. Like, am I doing something wrong? But now I get it. And so I've been on Mercury, which is kind of your second planet, and I've been going through incremental quests. I've gotten through them much better than I have in the past, because some of those quests have been particularly frustrating. There's one where you have to do kind of a horde mode wave, and you have to kill like 10 waves, and then like you get an option whether to proceed to extraction or stay in the fight. And I finally really kind of understand. Part of the problem is a lot of the times I've been trying to progress accounts, I've been live streaming it, and the truth of the matter is when I'm live streaming and you're trying to talk to chat, like you just don't pay as much attention to the game itself, and kind of particularly when it's like down in the weeds detailed. But I finally kind of figured some of that stuff out and put it together and bookmarked a few sites that tell me how to, get to the progression of the quest. With that cognitive offload, I've now been able to focus also on my frames, and figuring out like their weapons loadouts and figuring out like what's the fun, right? What's the progression model? I'm sure that there are some esoteric things that I am blowing off and not getting, just like is the case in Destiny 2. I'm sure that there's some more intelligent way that I'm supposed to go about like weapons progression and stuff in Destiny 2, but like I figured out to the 70th percentile, and then I'm like, that remaining 30% is too far in the weeds for me to be bothered with. So so this week, on that account, I got the Frost Warframe. So I've gotten to the point now where I have, 3 different frames, that I'm progressing, and, I can see the Warframe level, I can see the weapons level, I'm mixing and matching loadouts. I've finally kind of figured out some paradigms for like cosmetics. I'm using some of the magical powers. And I've also looked back at kind of the history of this, and we talked about it a little bit before, right? The reality is this game came out in 2013, the year before Destiny. It's been going for 9 years. It's still getting new content. They just dropped a new campaign. The game looks wonderfully amazing. In this next, they did a next gen upgrade specifically to help the consoles, but that resulted in a lot of sprucing up on the PC version as well. So, I played the PC. I'm playing the PC version at 1080p on an RTX 3060 at 240 frames per second with HDR on. And this is a 9-year-old game that looks pretty good, right? Pretty amazing, playing at an incredibly high frame rate, in comparison to a lot of the games that, online we argue and fight over which is the best, that have just come out like in the last 2 years. And I'm like, well, here's this thing, Destiny 2 goes on and on about its 10-year roadmap plan, and I'm like, this game will hit 10 years like next year, and it shows no sign of slowing down, and it seems to have an architecture that makes it, I won't say easy, but has a campaign architecture that makes them able to add things to it. They have not had to vault things like Bungie has done. I haven't. Maybe there's some type of inventory limit, but like in a week where Destiny has made like a really big hoopla about the fact that they increased the vault size from 500 to 600, like that's just not a problem for Warframe. So. And amazingly enough, on top of that, sometimes you would talk about these things and say these things and go, oh, well, but nobody plays Warframe. It's 15th on the Steam concurrent players list, right? So it's apparently still, just a couple slots below Destiny 2 and well above something like Halo Infinite. So it's just a machine that keeps going on. I've heard not one peep about like Digital Extremes having financial problems or not knowing how to keep the series going or having significant technical issues or, some of these crazy things that we hear about, with Destiny 2 and Halo Infinite and other things. And I'm like, this game doesn't get enough propers, right? But I'm having a great time. I recorded some video this week. It's an incredibly graceful game. It's being a ninja in space. And it's a third person kind of shooter. Which just gives it, there's a lot of beauty and grace to the combat animations on the screen, that quite frankly are head and shoulders above many, I mean, I'd put it up next to Destiny 2, probably. It's definitely head and shoulders above, a lot of other shooters in the space. So it's good. I'm having a good time with it, and I have gotten to finally that point kind of in my gaming life where I've stripped away enough of like the distractions and trying to keep up with 4, 5, 9 different platforms and VR and all this other kind of stuff to just really being able to settle down and really enjoy playing that game on a specific set of hardware, and understanding the quests and getting things out of it. So thoroughly enjoyable experience.
Since you've played it during different iterations of its time, when you come back to it now, are you noticing, like when I've jumped back into an MMO or even No Man's Sky, like over time in iterations that they've changed the onboarding or they've smoothed out some of the rough edges, are you noticing any of that?
I haven't. I've just never really had too much of a problem with Warframe from a mechanical aspect. So no, I haven't. I am sure that that's there. I just haven't progressed far enough into the game where that's become an issue. You know, where I've had anything like the controversy over void powers, right, in Destiny 2, or, you know, the nerfing of a weapon that just thoroughly torques off the entire community. I haven't gotten to a point where I see or hear a lot from about the community perspective, whereas I've gotten exposed to some of that, in Destiny 2 and around Halo Infinite, and hearing the things that people are unhappy about. The Warframe group seems to be a very quiet group on social media, at least. TennoCon, their big con, I think is coming up this summer, maybe early part of the summer, I think. No, everything seems to be happy-go-lucky as far as that business model goes. I've heard some things of strife, in the past about people, not being happy with the content, but again, I feel like that's that demographic that, has put 10,000 hours into the game and now, right, claims that they're unhappy. So sticking with it, we will see where it goes from here.
Nice. I'd be really interested to see as you progress through it. And, it's, as somebody who often jumps in and out of games, I really appreciate when somebody can describe that experience of just kind of living with a game for a while, and the knowledge you get, the shorthand, that piece, that experience is different than jumping from blockbuster to blockbuster.
Definitely. I mean, the interesting point now that I'm waiting for is to see, okay, so in most games like this, there's always a wall. Like, you hit a point where there's something you have to do to make the next progression that is just decidedly not fun. And that's where, players will typically figure out, how to push through, or they'll bounce off of it. Sometimes it's solved by you finding a friend or an ally to play through that section with. So it'll be interesting to see how it winds up. So that wraps up our top of the show segment about the games we've been playing. Let's step over and talk about a little bit of news. So DBQ, you dropped this one in the agenda about the games that have been announced for PlayStation Plus game lineup, which cuts a little bit across the Ubisoft Plus news story of those games coming to PlayStation Plus as well. Do you want to go ahead and take this one away?
Sure. Since we already started talking about subscription services and your lack and distaste of, so let's dive into a complex structure that Sony announced, right? The PlayStation Plus Essential, PlayStation Plus Extra, PlayStation Plus Premium. And again, the distinction there is the Essential is basically what PlayStation Plus is now, where it is, you get a few free games each month. You get online, you get cloud saves. Then you get into Extra, where you're going to get some PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5 games in PlayStation Extra. And then as you get into PlayStation Premium, you're going to end up with streaming PlayStation 3 games and PlayStation 1 and PSP games as well. So it is a big old mess of games. You also get some limited time trials on the premium and the deluxe plans. So I'm just going to go through a little bit here. I'm not going to read, because if you're interested in this, you've probably already dove through this. But the big distinctions is that we finally get some listing of titles for the deluxe plan, which is $100 a year. Or the premium plan, which is $120 a year, right? There are discounts there if you are paying them all in one. The pricing is a little bit different, right? I think it is $19, $20 a month or $15 a month if you're doing the extra, $10 a month if you're doing the deluxe. And the standard, what it is right now in terms of $60 a year. But it became a question of whether or not if there's enough value there. So in the deluxe and the premium ones, you get a significant number of first-person PlayStation Studio titles, but then you also get, as expected, right? Or should get a significant number of those. I think one of the things that, as I'm looking at the list, it is, if you are going back to your your description of where Game Pass is of value to someone. That if you are new to the PlayStation infrastructure, this is probably a really good value, right? If you're jumping in and you got a hand-me-down PlayStation 4 or you got a PlayStation 5 and you're just kind of getting into it, that $100 a year for all these games is pretty good, right? You get basically all of Sony's first party studios, all the big blockbusters over the past generation. You get, for things like Ghost of Tsushima Director's Cut, you get both that. You get the PlayStation 5 version of it as well. Same with Death Stranding, that you get the PS5 version of it as well. Miles Morales Spider-Man, you get the PS5 version as well. Otherwise, you're kind of getting the PS4 version. But if you're running that on a PS5, you've got already enhanced visuals and frame rates that are already baked into many of these games. But it is, it's a first party studio. There we go. Got there eventually. Greatest hits. But it is not just greatest hits. You also get some small stuff in there as well. You get Tearaway Unfolded. You get local Roco remasters. You get the infamous ones. This is the first time that the Demon Souls remake by Bluepoint for PlayStation 5 is showing up in PlayStation Plus. So the fact that you get things from Housemarque, which is now a first-person or second-party studio from Sony, all kind of works out nicely to get in there. But you also end up with a number of third-party games, and some of these are things that are not that unique to streaming, or not to streaming service, but to subscription services. Many of them have made their way through Game Pass at one point or another. Things like NBA 2K, Red Dead Redemption, Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy have all been on Game Pass at one point or another. Control, Batman Arkham Knight. But the piece here, as you alluded to, Game Logic, is that it also is bringing in almost all of, not quite all of, Ubisoft Plus. That you are getting some back catalog Ubisoft games. You are getting kind of the most recent Ubisoft game that is up on here is Assassin's Creed Valhalla for PlayStation 4 and 5, but you're not getting things like Riders Republic. You're not getting Far Cry 6. You're not getting Division 2. You're getting Division 1.
You're not getting Far Cry 5.
Yeah, right. So it's kind of a cherry-picked things, and where Ubisoft drew that line. If they looked at what's still got a tail of sales and kind of made that decision there, but again, if you're new into the infrastructure, there's a lot of value here. If you're somebody that has been playing throughout the PlayStation 4 generation, you probably, if you like these types of Sony first-person games or first-party games, I own most of these in some capacity, probably either through existing game PlayStation Plus subscriptions or through picking them up over various sales over time. There are a few things in here that I haven't had a chance to pick up yet, or haven't really prioritized or hit a price point that I was really willing to commit to. Like, oh yeah, I guess I'd be interested to try the Medieval or go back and try some of the Patapon remasters. I meant to pick up Gravity Rush at some point in time, having played it on PlayStation Vita, but whether or not it's enough to say that it's worth the $100 per year is a good question. For people that are in, I think your analogy of the different types of gamers, right? Like somebody that is new to this, somebody that is casual, or somebody that is following games on a regular basis, they're going to find different value here. As you move into the classic games catalog, you do get the classic games catalog. You do get some on the deluxe plan as well, but not too many. And you get some PlayStation 1 games, both first party and third party games. And then you get some of the remasters, or not even remasters, but where they've ported them to run on PlayStation 4. So things like the Jack series or Rogue Galaxy, Dark Cloud, some of the PlayStation 2 games that you can already buy from the PlayStation 4 store are running here as well. One of the pieces here that Sony did answer is that if you've purchased these previously, you do not need to be subscribed to one of the services or to that tier of service to be able to download it. So you would be able to, if you've purchased these on Vita or on PlayStation 4 already, that you'd be able to, some of the original PlayStation PSP games, if they're already sitting in your library, you have the ability to then download them once they're there, which I think is nice that they're doing. It should be kind of expected since you've already paid for that license, but in a world of digital licenses, it's not something you can necessarily count on. So,
and what's the other half of that statement? Because there's a blank there that's not filled in. So are they saying that if you've purchased these games digitally from one of their storefronts before, that you could, because I don't understand how, if you bought a physical version of the game, how would they know?
Well, it's not a physical. If you've purchased them digitally,
okay.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
The quote says, players who have previously purchased a digital version of select games from the original PlayStation and PSP generation will not have to make a separate purchase. They can play them, they can re-download them from the PlayStation Store at no cost if they already own the digital version. I think the caveat there is digital version of select games, right? Like there's no guarantee that that every game listed is going to be counted in that select game aspect. So yeah, and this is, go ahead.
That's what I felt. I felt like this is a thing that, and it's been very typical of a series of recently, and I've had this problem with Sony for a very long time, that they do this thing of giving half statements, which often unfurls their messaging. But at any rate, any day, it's always, I feel like there's always a deliberateness in not telling the other half of the story. I think this is a thing that's when it is said and printed on a website, it sounds very egalitarian and very consumer friendly, but the reality of the footprint of that goodness is a little less than it comes across as in marketing ad copy.
Yes, right. I think it is phrased in such a way that it sounds good in the lead up and in the rollout. Usually there's enough other stuff in the news cycle that kind of buries it a little bit deeper. So
I wanted to go back, and so I just wanted to clarify a little bit. The reason I've dropped all of my subscription services isn't because I've flipped and because now I feel like all subscription services are bad. It's just that I've gotten to a point where in my consumption of games, they are not the good fit that they were before. I had Apple Arcade as a travel solution, and I don't feel like I need it as much anymore. I had Stadia as a travel solution, and I feel like I don't need it anymore. And I've resolved that, if I do need to game, now that I've given up my Switch on travel, I'm probably going to go ahead and go back to getting a gaming laptop now that I'm kind of doubling down on PC. PC Game Pass is more a matter of it just doesn't fit my lifestyle as much anymore, and I don't feel like the service is doing what it needs to do. A couple things about this PlayStation list. So in some of these, I feel, I'm not certain because it's a very complicated list. I feel like there are some of these where there's a PlayStation 4 version, where there's a PlayStation 5 version that exists, but you're not getting it in this service.
That is factually correct.
Okay.
So yes, one of those examples is the much belabored Marvel Spider-Man by Insomniac, that there is a remaster that exists, but the PlayStation 4 version is what's available on this service. And this was one of the ones that, with the launch of the PlayStation 5, while Miles Morales had a free upgrade, that if you were an owner of Spider-Man the 2017 game that you needed to purchase the $20 remaster version on PlayStation 5, that there was not an upgrade path for that game. And so that continues here, is that you're getting the PlayStation 4 version rather than the remaster version.
Yeah, and to revisit that controversy and why it was so people, that I believe that was actually a 2018 game.
Could be, yeah. I have to go back and double check what the year was.
Right.
I think the other two games that have PlayStation 5 versions are ones that you just picked up this spring with the Uncharted 4 and Lost Legacy. That there are now PlayStation 5 versions of that collection, which if you own one of them, it is a $10 upgrade for both of them. But here on this service, you're getting the PlayStation 4 versions of this.
So a little bit of this is my problem with just the kind of general Sony stinginess, right? That, like, here's a thing that doesn't have to be a thing, but Sony has gone out of their way to make it a thing. And at some point, that commentary is going to come up, and I think they're going to mealy mouth through it, and it's going to be another messaging problem. Instead of them just admitting and saying, look, we're going to make you pay for the most elegant copy of the thing and be upfront and done with it. But at the end of the day, I feel like a lot of this is just, like, not necessary. Like, I guess a part of me says, like, if you're not going to give people the ultimate version of the thing, like, I wouldn't even put it, I don't know that I would even put it in PlayStation Plus at this point, right? Why have the controversy when it's not necessary by, this is my whole thing. Like, if I'm going to fail a class, I just want to, if I'm going to fail a test, I just want to fail a test. I don't want to get, a 69, right, or a 68. So close. So this is, so that aspect of it is a little weird. It's just and I know it's taking an immense amount of time. Somebody who's going through and making these decisions is having to filter at a very fine level of detail. Well, this, not that. This is okay. Like, and I just, and then 19 people above them in a chain of command are having to buy off on that, right? And it just seems like a bit overly and a little extra. Yeah,
I think it'll be, I think the rollout of it is going to be interesting to see how this all plays out. It's a large library for the deluxe and the premium, there's so many confusion. Okay. I need to go back and clarify. So the extra, which is the $15 a month, and the premium which is $18 a month, give you both the PlayStation 4, 5 catalog that we've been talking about. Then when you get into the premium, the $18 a month or $120 a year, that's when you get PlayStation 1, PSP games there, and PlayStation 3 streaming. Where it gets confusing is that there is a PlayStation Premium, and also in some regions that tier is called PlayStation Deluxe because PlayStation 3 streaming is not available. So there are 4 different tiers, 2 of them being the same except for PlayStation 3 streaming, which again is, we haven't even touched on the PlayStation 3 streaming. I mean, obviously we're not the market for this, right? If you are a new player, if I'm a recent parent or a parent whose child is now becoming, of age to be interested in video games, which is incredibly young at this point, right? And I have lapsed off PlayStation, but I have fond remembrances for the brand. I can see where this is an instant catalog of nostalgia, similar to what Game Pass can be for some people, similar to what Nintendo Online is at a smaller scale. But it is for people getting into this. There's a lot here. The fact that there's, there's a variety of different Hot Shots Golf or Echo Chrome, which I haven't even thought about in years. That there are a number of games here that I have fond memories for, but I also don't know that I am looking to pony up $10 a month for the year subscription to have the right to not walk over to my shelf and grab the physical version of something and keep playing.
Yeah, you're very much paying. I mean, much of the same way that you do when you pay for Amazon Prime. You're paying for somebody to give you access to a digital warehouse of content that you would just as soon not have to store, yourself. I agree with you. This is great for, this is an instant content for somebody to go along with their console. If they're buying it or you're buying it for them, in a consumer paradigm where you don't have to worry about constantly replenishing the well. Now, so one of the differences with this will be, though, that Game Pass always has new stuff coming into it. This thing always has old stuff coming into it. And at a certain point, in fact, as far as we know today, it's finite, right? There's going to come a point where they put X number of titles in here, and they're not going to add any more. Now, the business reality is probably they're incrementally going to always be adding a little, tiny bits and pieces to it. But essentially, if you buy this box plus the subscription for a person, that person's going to make a checklist of what's there. And eventually, right, given infinite time and infinite resources, this list will run out, right? Whereas, like I said, the value proposition of the other thing is that, there's always new stuff coming into it. And so, again, the price position then becomes, okay, so I'm gonna buy this for a person. I'm gonna give them this subscription. They're still gonna be coming back to me and asking me for money to buy new stuff, right? Whereas on Game Pass, that's probably less likely necessarily of a scenario. I like the portfolio of games that are on offer here. I don't like what I feel like is the unnecessary stinginess of not having the PlayStation 5 versions in there for somebody who, so it dampens the value proposition for a person who has a new PlayStation 5. Why would you get the subscription if the end result of the subscription is that in some cases it's going to force you to have to go buy the game because that's the only option of obtaining that version of it. And then when those versions are $70, it's like, am I going to pay $100, $120 a year? Or am I going to, when I have to buy these games, if I buy two of them, that's $140, right? Or am I just going to decide that I don't need the subscription? Now, one of the things, I guess, is all of the online cloud save functionality still trapped in that lowest tier? So
yeah, you still need PlayStation Plus for online, for multiplayer gaming.
For paid games. Right.
Yeah, for paid games, yep. And for cloud saves.
Yeah.
So that the functionality of the existing level has not changed.
Yeah. So in aggregate, it just feels like a bit of a very Apple-esque type play where, yes, there's stuff, but I want you to, I need you to buy a HomePod to go along with your iPhone, and then I would need you to pay for Apple Music to, actually access the content to play on that stuff. It just comes across as a bit overly, and I guess there are some people who are concerned enough about their backlog in historical games and PlayStation nostalgia that they want to be able to get back to some of this stuff. And in many cases, this is the only way to get back to some of those titles, but it just feels like a very draconian, digital overlord kind of let them eat cake approach.
I think the thing that I'm going to be watching before I make a decision is, which means I'm probably not jumping on day one, but I could see giving it a try for, trying a month of it and seeing, or, at the mid-tier and paying for a year chops it down to $8 a month, which I just talked about purchasing Gunfire Reborn on a whim because it was there. And I enjoy it. I think one of the things that I want to watch is when do newer first party titles get added, right? Is this a year window? This is assuming, right, that there's a number of when does Horizon Forbidden West come to this service? Is it at Christmas time because it gives them something to market? Is it Is it, is there an embargo period that they're going to be looking to cycle things in on?
Well, here's the really interesting calculus is, so Horizon Forbidden West, that's a game that is obviously going to go to PC as well. So do you put this in your subscription service? Or do you prioritize your ability to still make sales on it because you're going to spool a PC version? And therefore wait and make it, is it a 3-step evolution, right? Does the game come out on PlayStation 5, then it comes out on PC, and then finally it arrives on your subscription service? If it's the cannibalization of those sales, of those PC sales, should be, you would think, very small, but again, I point you back to the right, to Exhibit A, the evidence of the stingy approach to some of this stuff that may, be represented in a Sony decision that comes out.
I want to throw in one last kind of projection on this, right? Is, as Sony has been out there talking about wanting 9 to 10 games of live service games over time, how much content in those games is tied in with the different tiers here? As Bungie's merger and acquisition comes through, we're not going to go back to a Destiny 1 where there's certain strikes and Crucible maps tied to a console, or weapons tied to a console, I would think. But you probably definitely are going to be certain cosmetics. There are certain, I would think that part of the easy value add that they provide into this for certain communities are some of those aspects to live service games.
I mean, there's a part of me that says either there are some of those games that will come to PlayStation Plus and others that just flat out won't, like will always exist entirely decoupled from this service. But then there's another part of me that says, I don't know that any of them come to PlayStation Plus, or that, given, again, the Sony approach that we're going to make you pay for everything, that's going to mean, look, the microtransactions, the content in here, they're going to be entirely decoupled from PlayStation Plus. PlayStation Plus is a service for game preservation and to let you get back to legacy titles, and where we periodically seed it with, ostensibly new-ish content from the early vestiges of the generation, but all that stuff always comes 2-3 years behind, and the living games as a service stuff just never come to it at all.
I could see that. I could see Sony going that route and messaging it in that way and kind of positioning that. So it'll be. I'm less. I don't know that I was ever really excited about what it is right now. I'll be very interested to see what it becomes.
All right, then. Well, let's talk about the corporation's financials, whose name I always mess up. It's Take-Two, which I frequently...
It is not 2K. It is not Rockstar. It is Take-Two and all the subsidiaries underneath there. So I don't know that we need to dive a whole lot into this. There's a few things here that stuck out to me that I wanted to kind of draw attention to. Fourth quarter, they were up year over year. Their fourth quarter revenues were up, but net income was down. But their results beat the kind of projections that they had. They stated that the recent releases of WWE 2K22 and Tiny Tina's Wonderland have exceeded their expectations, as did Red Dead Redemption 2, which in the last quarter sold another 1 million. So I think one of the things here, speaking of long tails on Take-Two games, Rockstar games, Grand Theft Auto 5's lifetime sales to date hits 165 million, this is in the period where it had the releases for Xbox Series and PlayStation 5. But that the gamesindustry.biz article says that growth rate is the same that it's been since the start of the pandemic. So, which is to say, pretty impressive. that it has not trailed off any, as Grand Theft Online is its juggernaut onto itself. NBA 2K is selling about the same as 2K21 did, maybe a little bit over, but it's very narrowly still around the 10 million mark there. They do go on to say that they're expecting, where they're looking for revenue in the coming year is from their a couple franchises of. They cite their sports franchises with WWE and NBA 2K, and also PGA 2K, a new iteration of the golf game, and that is one of the pieces there that they have cited as something coming down the pipe. So that was, for me as somebody who enjoys 2K, that was good to see. They also cite Midnight Suns, Marvel's Midnight Suns, the strategy game that is was supposed to come this spring, delayed until later in 22. We'll see, but they're putting it in their fiscal year, so at least it is anticipated that it will hit around before spring, before March of 23. They also cite Kerbal Space Program 2, which I forgot was a thing that Take-Two is doing. So anything stand out here to you? Any big surprises? A lot of projection, a lot of a lot of their revenue coming from in-game transactions, which we have seen from developer to developer this quarter and this fiscal year.
I would have thought the sales of NBA 2K22 would have actually been higher. 10 million units actually doesn't sound like that much for something that should ostensibly be, the equivalent of Madden for 2K. Also interesting that I didn't see anywhere in here, and of course, I mean, it's probably buried somewhere in their actual earnings report, which I didn't look at. I didn't hear, the typical, X percentage of their revenue that was generated from microtransactions.
No, I didn't see that either. I just saw, I haven't dug into their actual reports. It's usually there if we dig into the corporate site and the financials, but I haven't had a chance to do that to see. The fact that Grand Theft Auto Online gets a special call out, and all Grand Theft Auto Online is at this point is microtransactions. So, it makes sense that it's getting separated out from Grand Theft Auto 5 because there's enough revenue generated from it. But yeah, it would be very interesting. I think the 2K22 aspect, the NBA 2K22 in a game that is so full of microtransactions, it would be very interesting to see what that percentage looks like. I'm also curious, as you mentioned about 10 million units, I would think that is probably similar to where Madden is. It's also very possible, it's also possible that it sells less but brings in more transactions, given the model that it is. And so that makes it more profitable. So yeah, I'm curious on how those compare, given that they are the kind of two big American sports franchises.
Yeah, probably the most encouraging story is the story of Tiny Tina, and hopefully that just, sends a signal, and hopefully a signal that they pick up on that, people are interested in that type of, single player, shootery content still.
Yeah, and the change of pace, I think. Well, and this was one of the things that it did stick out to me. They say at one point I read that they call it the Tiny Tina Wonderlands franchise. So they are identifying it as something that can live on its own, comes from a different, isn't necessarily, yes. While Tiny Tina was viewed as the best new franchise launch from 2K in several years. So take that as what you will. It could be best launch within a franchise, or the fact that it could be seen as a new franchise or a spin-off franchise from Borderlands as a whole.
Yeah, I'd be willing to play more Tiny Tina. Just get rid of the bobblehead strategic map. So I'm sorry, anything else?
No, I was going to say, you want to take this last news story?
Yep, so this last news story is a bit of gaming news. We have time for that. The Valiant, a new medieval RTS announced by THQ Nordic with the byline suggesting that it is like Dawn of War 2 with historic knights. The story by Matt Purslow over at IGN. THQ Nordic has announced The Valiant, a new RTS set during the 13th century developed by Kite Games. It is actually coming to PC, but also console too on PS4, PS5, Xbox One, and Xbox Series X and S. The Valiant focuses on smaller forces, tactical combat, and RPG-style heroes with traditional strategy mechanics such as base building pushed to the side. In short, it sounds like Warhammer 40,000 Dawn of War 2, but for historic knights. So I posted this up because all of these little tidbits, interest me, again, as somebody who's doubling down on their times being spent on PC. I have to admit, earlier this week, I was on another podcast, and the person was talking about things like Flight Simulator and I also, they didn't say it specifically on this podcast, but in an earlier thread, conversations held with other people kind of preaching this side of the argument, would call out Age of Empires 4. And I'm like, I don't know that Age of Empires 4 and Microsoft Flight Simulator are really big deals from a Game Pass perspective for console owners. But as I thought through that today, one of the things that I had to remember is, there is keyboard and mouse support, pretty robust keyboard and mouse support on the Xbox, and that might very well be a gateway method by which people are discovering RTSs, which just in the past I would have never recommended, for anybody to play an RTS with a gamepad. But that could very well be a thing, right? In particular now, as you add more to the mix for people to discover. So there is a trailer out now for the Valiant. Talks about there being, I think, a 15 mission campaign, which I want to say is about the size of Company of Heroes. So good sizing fit for an RTS. I feel like anything beyond that is definitely getting to a point of overstaying its welcome. They talk a little bit about the story behind it. Kind of going over the time of the Crusades, and looking for ancient relics. So it has a typical UI. Nothing here kind of jumps out at me as being particularly innovative. It does have PvP and PvE, and then again refers to it feeling and looking a bit like Dawn of War 2, and even harkening back to some of its multiplayer modes that it had. So THQ Nordic is a development shop that interests me a little. They show a lot of similarities and seem like they're going after similar content that the original THQ used to do. So, and that makes them just one of those companies that causes me to kind of perk up my ears, right, whenever I hear that they're working on something. So not a huge story, but we had some room to put on the slate, some of the things that we actually really like to read about, which is people putting out new games. Any comments or thoughts?
Kite Studios. I was just looking up Kite Studios here. They've done a little bit of other RTS work. Are you familiar with the developers there? Are they veterans from other areas, or?
No, I'm not sure. You said you were looking at Kite Studios? Oh, Kite Games. Kite Games, yes. No, I haven't. I didn't look them up, which I need to.
It's the fact that there's a new RTS and a new, that's great. I think it's as something that has trickled out, or has not always seen kind of the same support other than remasters. It's interesting to see a new franchise, a new game within that genre, and potentially something that isn't beholden to all the existing mechanics, so that they can take a fresh perspective at some things too, which would be interesting to see how they approach that.
Right. No, but I think looking them up bears is good advice because of the similar things that I said about people. Everybody who got rah over Hogwarts, and I'm like, when you look at that developer's pedigree, they have not made good games. I'm like, I think I would pump the brakes a little bit on, you know.
I mean, Kite Games did make Swine HD, so I mean,
Right. Well, you know, I mean, I was referring to the studio that's doing Hogwarts. The fact that they have a pretty bad track record. But actually, I mean, so these guys have done. It's hard to tell. I'm hesitant to say what they've done because some of these may have just been them working on, expansion content. But it looks like they worked on Sudden Strike 4, which I think, in comparison to, for somebody who's trying to do an RTS, that's a good, past performance thing to be able to point at. Yeah,
it's a Hungary studio. Yep.
Yeah. So I'm sure it'll be good. It certainly piqued my interest, so it's just something that I will, keep a look at. And it's is retro sci-fi kind of or it's dystopian, or I don't know. It feels like it's in a set of window dressings and in an environment and in a time period that I find appealing in terms of other fictional works. So I think it'll be something worthwhile to keep track of. All right, well, let's go back to finishing out our rundown on games that we've been playing and kind of round out the evening. So, DBQ, you want to talk to us a little bit about your time in MLB the Show 22?
Sure. Yeah, I have been spending a lot of time in sports games over the past month, whether it's I'm in a fourth year of a franchise with Madden 22 online with a friend, and I'm in my second season of March to October in MLB the Show 22, but I also picked up or rented the Switch version from Gamefly because I was really curious on how the Switch version would run, what it looks like, how it compares. I successfully linked up my profile so that my Road to the Show player comes over. You can upload franchise save files to the cloud and bring them over once you've linked up your profile. You can't do that for March to October. So it really is your Diamond Dynasty, your Road to the Show and franchise stuff. That seems to be what I haven't, in looking around online and within the menus, there's not an option for March to October. And even some of the options for within the franchise mode, you almost need to create a franchise on both platforms and upload one, and then once there's a file there, it can download another file. It's not as smooth as it could be, but again, this is the Switch, so that doesn't surprise me. As somebody who has played MLB the Show 15 on Vita, I was interested to see how this looks comparatively. It's running at about 30 frames per second, which really kind of messes up my swing timing. So I've had to kind of relearn, and jumping back and forth between the two means that the first couple at bats of an inning is always a little bit of a struggle. But then once I get the swing timing down, it works just as fine. It works just well. It runs fine. It plays really well. It's the full the show experience. It's all there. I've played it on handheld. I have not played it on docked, really, because if I'm going to play in front of a TV, I'll play the other version. From what I've been reading online, it looks a little better on handheld because you're not blowing up those graphics onto a screen, which makes sense. One of the things on handheld that I have done differently is I've adjusted the batting camera so that I'm zoomed in a little further so that it's easier to pick out the ball. I'm playing it on the Switch OLED, so it looks pretty good. It's easy enough to pick out. It's been enjoyable to sit on a couch, curl up on a couch and play some baseball. It's a great experience. I think it's not the ideal way to play the show. I have, once my testing of it is over, I have gone back and played a whole lot more on Xbox because it's a smoother experience at 60 frames per second. But if that is not an option for you, or you are on the go a lot, or don't have, you game not in front of a TV, I'm really impressed with what Sony San Diego was able to put onto the Switch. And it's well worth it. Realistically, if it goes on sale as we get into, the All-Star game or we get into the fall with playoffs, I could see picking it up just to have it on the go, to be able to play around portably with it as well, because it works offline. I could play a franchise offline. I don't have to be connected. If I'm doing Diamond Dynasty or Road to the Show, I do need to be connected, but having the ability to be offline means that it is great for travel or for vacations. So I could see it being in somebody's. There is not a lot of full-fledged sports games on Switch. Soccer, FIFA is a stripped down version with only kind of seasons and exhibitions. That there's not really the best football game on Switch is Retro Bowl, which is like a Tecmo Bowl. There are plenty of golf options. Swiss would argue that there are not many real baseball options, as somebody who has, imported the Japanese versions of different games, but this is the only real version of Major League Baseball out there. I've also been playing Bush League Hockey, which is kind of amateur league hockey, kind of low polygon, which works. It plays out very much like a mid 90s arcade hockey game, and I'm really enjoying that as well. So I'm enjoying having some sports experiences on the Switch, but compared to other sports, MLB the Show is the best out there. NBA 2K22 is there. NBA 2K22 needs an online connection for anything that you're doing in it. So the fact that MLB the Show does not need it for some things makes it all the better fit for a Switch, in my perspective.
All right. Well, then the last thing I have to talk about is Halo Infinite. I've been continuing to plug away at it. It is a lengthy, arduous, draconian process to have to get through.
And this is multiplayer, right?
This is multiplayer. I've been playing. Okay. This is me playing the multiplayer version of it. As I've been describing to people this week, it's just a game that just hums with great beauty when you're on the battlefield. I struggle to put my finger on a game that does that better. Even while I admit that I have my fun with Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War. It's tough for me to think of another game that, when I isolate to just the battlefield, kind of plays and feels better. Minus the problem that they're having with desync, which I've seen happen to me and is just a thoroughly frustrating thing. And there are some nights where, when it goes on for a while during your play session, I'm just like ready to stop playing. But playing Team Slayer is great. We started mixing in some King of the Hill last week, and that's providing some variance. I see a window where, once I start crouching down on more time to just play kind of on my own, versus playing with the squad and the people that I run with, that can be my time to, knuckle down on the challenges that you have to do, right, to play through, to, do some other things, and I latched on to Last Spartan Standing, because, some of the recurring challenges that were up for that week required you to play that mode. And as such, those modes which I have pushed back a little bit against, because I feel like in Halo Infinite, anytime you get out beyond Team Slayer, you wind up running into this convoluted, overly complicated, set of rules to play each different mode in, which just makes it hard for me to switch and rotate between a bunch of modes at a time. So my initial foray has been just to learn, Last Spartan Standing, and that has paid off a little. That as I learn that mode more, I'm able to kind of settle down and not be as cranky about it. But at the end of the day, the stinginess of the progression system and the way that aspect is tied into it, leaves me with a bad taste in my mouth.
Are you rolling with randoms or with a crew most of the time?
I have one friend that I've been playing with pretty normally, and then every once in a while, we have other friends who kind of jump on, just for an hour or something at a time, and And those times are fun, when you're playing with a full squad. It gets kind of irritating, just as was the case when you and I played in Tau. It gets irritating to see, another team that is clearly composed of a 4-person squad where they're clearly on comms and coordinating their attacks and defense. And you're sitting there by yourself without a headset on. I've tried it on a couple of occasions to like turn the fire team chat on, but I have yet to hear another person. I mean, I'm not even hearing the people. Like, typically, if you go into a Call of Duty match and turn in-game comms on, you're immediately assaulted by the guy playing his boombox right next to his Xbox, eating cereal, while the wife or kids periodically yell at him. I haven't even run into that person on Halo Infinite, so it's just really weird.
It's such a stereotype, but I've also experienced it, right? I mean, like, I have, yes. So you have the battle pass for this one, correct? And you have the battle pass for Warframe.
So the third one is Destiny 2.
Okay. That was my question. You said you got bandwidth for 3, so where's that third one?
Right. So it's in Destiny 2, I threw down for the whole year, so that will be part of the rotation for the whole year. And at some point, I will I say that I will fall off of Halo Infinite and I'll drop Warframe for a bit, but we'll see. I mean, the other problem with Halo Infinite, I mean, I hate to talk about the subscription problems because there's tons of problems with the Battle Pass that have been well documented. But, the problem with the way Halo Infinite approaches the notion that they let you hold on to past seasons Battle Pass is that you're only able to have one active at a time, which means, the way I've articulated it, I said, so you're basically accumulating Battle Pass debt that now you carry along with you, whereas in another Battle Pass system, you would just lose it. And one might argue that maybe that's better. But, I say I will drop it, but the problem is in any given season, so I'm staying on the Battle Pass 1 right now until I push that through to completion, and then I'll unbuckle Battle Pass 2. Now, it's likely that I'll then end the season with Battle Pass 2 having accumulated an amount of Battle Pass 2 debt, right, that I'm going to carry with me into season 3. And while I say, I would theoretically drop it for a follow-on season, the problem is you get very tempted to work that debt off, right? Which may be the hook in keeping you playing. So we'll see how that goes. Brap dropped through the live chat. So
we missed Brap. Oh,
I did.
He's been here before.
I apologize about that.
Thanks for stopping in.
Brap is happy that we are here talking about Halo Infinite. I missed him for about the first 6 minutes. He talks about, the drudgery of getting to the back half of your, 2-hour session to that point, about an hour in, where you go down to just earning 50 XP. And then mentions that, we've had some great matches on Halo Infinite. And he's right. And like I said, like, it doubles when you're playing with a teammate. Like, it feels incredibly good to be on the battlefield, and if, to be quite honest, if Halo Infinite, and they won't do it, and I understand why there's a design reasons why you wouldn't, because people just need that downtime and a break and a chance to get, but like, if there were a way, and I always liken these games to like, going down to the boys club or the local gym or whatever and playing hoops, right, for the night. And, I'm sure you've had those nights where you're running with a crew, you're playing, 2-on-2, 3-on-3, whatever. And yes, while it is your norm for there to be like a 5-minute pause, right, we've also, run those times where you get to the end of a pickup game and like there's no break. You're just like, let's go, like run the next 3, right? Like you take no break and you go. It would be great if there was something like that for Halo Infinite where you could just, tap a rematch button or something like that at the end of a match. And so instead of it coming out, going to the score screen, doing all of this janky pausing that it does, sending you back to the lobby, coming back into the match, going through all the characters, it would be nice if you could just like re-up and go right into a match. And that would tamp down the negativity that you experience of getting those 50 XP, right?
Sure, right? Because you're just going right into another one. You're keeping that do loop going.
Right.
So
yeah.
What games, as I'm trying to think about that, like, I think that makes a whole lot of sense. What what franchises do that well, that don't bump you back to some type of scoreboard or kind of toss you back into a lobby as it match makes. Like I think that keeping somebody in that pipeline probably helps retention, I would think.
Yeah, I want to say there were older versions so back when you could manage your own lobby on consoles, I want to say like that third Call of Duty World War or whatever, or Call of Duty World War Conquest or whatever. I want to say you could rapid recycle back into matches on that, and that may have been true for all those games that came out in that Xbox 360 era. That if you were in a lobby of 8 people, I want to say that you could just have maps on like a rotation. What is the game? I want to say that those were those games that you could go into a thing where like you might queue up a progression of like 10 matches and have it randomized maps, and you would never know what map you were going to get next, and you could just go, right, and just rapidly reinsert into the next match. So at least those, and I'm sure that there are other examples.
It's interesting in a world where the importance of the XP bar going up and your unlocks and everything else, like you don't see that as a setup very often anymore.
Well, and that would make sense, right? Because the progression system was first introduced in Modern Warfare 2.
Yep. Not in the first one, but I think in 2. Yeah, I think the first one.
I think the first one may have had progression, but I don't think it reached its full culmination until Modern Warfare 2. I think
something with Prestige and things like that. Once that kind of hit, yep.
Yeah. So it makes sense that before that you would have had designs that would have allowed for you to just rapidly recycle back into a match, because there would have been no need for you to look at your stats, right, coming out of a match. So I don't know. So with MLB the Show 22, so you've played it on Switch and you've played it on Xbox. Have you played on PlayStation 5 over the last 2 years?
No, I haven't. I did not play it on PlayStation 5.
So other than just like the science experiment and kind of curiosity aspect, is there any, because I mean, so if I look at that evolution, right, it would have been PlayStation, because that's the only place that it existed. And then the moment it was uncaged from that walled garden, you have played it elsewhere. Just curious, is there a reason behind that, you think, or?
Oh, sure. I think the reason is Game Pass, right? That it is on Game Pass, day and date. Going back to having new games on a subscription service, the fact that it's on Game Pass is a reason that I'm playing it there. I own 17, 19, and 20 on PlayStation 4. I still go back and play 17 because it was the last iteration of the way they did Road to the Show. I picked up in the lead up to 22. I re-downloaded and played 20 on PlayStation 5 because it had some upgrades in terms of enhancements for PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5. And it was the last time that the Road to the Show character creator didn't have the loadout system that it has now. So that was another reason why I went back to it there. And then, the Switch thing is really the curiosity of, like, in some ways, I will probably pick it up on sale just to support the developer and the fact that bringing it, unshackling it from one system and bringing it onto multiple others is something I want to support as a player. I will say that playing it, jumping back and forth between playing 22 and then picking up the PlayStation 4 controller and playing 17 as I'm working through another season there, I kind of, I do want to see where the DualSense takes it. I miss the fact, even as cheesy as it is, I miss the fact when my teammate screams out in my controller, plays that one, right? I mean, there's the little part of me that is sitting on second base in Little League as a kid and, knows those call outs, there's something nostalgic about that as well. So yes, I would see that, I will be looking, now that I have a PlayStation 5, I will be looking to see when a sale comes up on this. I wasn't in any, by the time that I had a PlayStation 5 this January, I wasn't going to pick up the Show 21 even on sale, which it was a pretty discounted prices, knowing that 22 was coming out relatively quickly.
All right, man. Anything else that you want to talk about tonight?
No, I got a lot more baseball talking than I expected, so thanks.
Great. Hey, look, everybody, obviously we're going to report out next week on the Picks Plays. You guys have heard us spool that assignment, so it's about playing something with some type of a metaverse aspect to it. DBQ is going to be playing Godzilla vs. Kong Warzone. Myself and Talmaster have not declared yet what we're playing for that, but I'm going to, since we're running long, I don't want to go through the Picks Plays word by word. You can see those in the show notes. Next week, I will be hosting again. I think that's what I wrote into the agenda before I monkey dorked with the schedule for them going into June. So I think that's the case, but it may not be the case. Somebody else may be hosting next week. But at any rate, all of us should be here. And so it... whoever's hosting is just a matter of rotation and mixing it up with variety. It'll still be the same three co-hosts. Great conversation about gaming tonight, DBQ, and goings on within the industry. And so with that, if we have nothing else to talk about, until next time, take care of yourselves. Stay safe out there. Play the games that you like and come here to talk about the games that you love. Once again, my name has been Game Logic with my co-host DBQ Hams. That's going to do it for us for tonight. Good night, good luck, and good gaming. That's going to do it for us. We're out of here.